because it went and it lit up the whole desert floor where we were supposed to be, and then it merged into the earth and went under the earth. And I was told this is where they have a deep facility, ETs, out there in the center of Joshua Tree. All of us are more powerful than we give her credit for, because the totality of the unbounded conscious being is folded within us. The more you're pure-hearted and innocent and childlike, not childish, childlike, the more the ETs go, they're very childlike actually when you meet them. And they're very, very intelligent, but they're very pure-hearted. So what I want to do, I'll just introduce this concept that we've talked about: remote viewing, or learning by consciousness and contact. The whole idea, the foundation of CE5 contact is the mind and consciousness being used to not only sense or see ET craft or people and worlds, but also then to flip that around to what I call coherent thought sequencing, where basically once you make that contact and image, you can then guide them to where you are. And the way you do that is literally flip it around from looking out to connecting to their mind and their console, their technology-assisted consciousness systems, and then showing exactly where you are. And it is like, Google Earth or something where you zoom in, but you're zooming in from where you perceive them. So if you perceive them under the water, you're showing them this, right? If you're seeing them out from another galaxy, then you're going to see that, you're going to bring them in from that angle. If you pick up one that's out by Mars, then you're going to look towards the sun and the earth and then zoom into this part of the earth, showing them where you are. Now, some people are more visual than others. Others are more verbal. But remember, whether it's visual or verbal, what they're really picking up on, because, and this is why I went through the cosmology the other day, is that in the structure of consciousness, there's a level that's pre-verbal, even pre-visual. It's called causality, and it's the thought essence of it. So in other words, even if you're seeing it or using English to describe it, within that is a deeper level of its actual meaning, and that is the transcendent level, deeper consciousness. So they can pick up on that. That is what I call the universal translator. The universal translator, you have consciousness, and then the aspect of a discrete, D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E, not D-I-S-C-R-E-E-T, look it up, a specific discrete thing. And so that means that if you, like I use the analogy, you can say a tree. Well, that's an English word. You can see a tree, but within the image of the tree is the essence, the causative thought itself that is actually deeper. That's how translation is happening. Interstellar is at that level. And intuition happens that way too. And this is why it can be a knowingness as opposed to a specific word or image. It's a knowingness. And people know why. I just know. Because it's coming in from something that is deeper and more profound within the mind and consciousness field. Does that make sense? So when you understand that, then it doesn't really matter how good your visualization is, whatever your tendency is, right? Some people are very visual and very good at visualization. Others, they kind of want to think it in words. Others can do it by just being, right? And working on a much deeper level of knowingness and specificity. So that's why we're doing the coherent thought sequencing, because their technologies interface directly with that. And this, of course, is, in these programs that have used it in a rather disturbing way to sort of hijack the craft and bring them into a strike area. But that's why all the way back to the early 90s, the people in those operations knew that this was it, this worked. And it's why I was told by a national security agency operative back in '92, they said they're very upset that you figured out the Rosetta Stone of contact, right? because it is the Rosetta Stone. It's basically the ability, and then by universalizing it, saying, look, everyone, you teach them about consciousness, that you're awake, you can use your mind to sense. You may not see clearly, you may get a sense of it. Then what happens is that you can then connect to them, but you need to understand they have the innate telepathic ability, but their accuracy is greatly augmented through these technologies. That's what the whole technology-assisted consciousness is. It assists their abilities, but also the consciousness assisting and directing the technology. So, you just look at a computer screen and think, directed a beam of thought, it does it, right? That's how it works. So visualize that, and that's why this does work. And that's also why in covert programs, they began to use it, unfortunately, for a very destructive purpose. We're doing the opposite. We're doing it as ambassadors from humanity to their world and their species. And the good news is that they very much understand the science of consciousness that we went through the other day. They understand the cosmology and how it's structured. And they love it when people do what we're doing. Why? You think about this, and except for the French government that did a project with us back in 2009, 10, 11, those documents are in the archive. I call it the French initiative with the Ministry of Defense. It was an official operation. When you read those documents, you'll weep. I mean, they're so beautiful. And their commitment to go on a long-term journey peacefully to make contact with these ETs, right? So that was the seed of something growing, and then it kind of fell apart after the admiral who was in charge passed away and the president at the time, Sarkozy, left office. But it shows it can be done by a government, and it was successful, by the way. We know by any government, right? So that's the other thing. If you're from other countries, you keep in mind that that there are 8 billion people on the planet, and America has 340 million of them, which is like 4.5%. So it's a big world out there. And so this progress, both on the disclosure front and on the contact front, could happen from anywhere. And the first serious government that puts some kind of resources behind this will lead the world on this issue. And I want to be very clear, it doesn't have to be the United States. But right now, that's where a lot of this is happening officially. But in terms of CE5, it could happen from any country. There may be countries that don't have a really strong basis in, these black covert programs dealing with this, but they could still set up the mechanism and the support for contact. And even I could advise them on countermeasures so that the ET craft are protected when they come in. I can get into that, but you need the resources of some significant government operation, but that can happen anywhere on the planet. It doesn't have to be the United States. I know there are people from all over the world here, Norway, Canada, other places in Europe, so just keep that in mind. India. I know their prime minister is very interested in this, Modi, so have had his military people reach out. But he's also extremely interested in consciousness and meditation, but regardless of what you want of its politics. But so this could happen anywhere, so just keep that in mind. In the meanwhile, the real action is with we the people, because the more that the people are doing this and are in a state where they come together, you do get this critical mass effect in consciousness, the so-called Maharishi effect, that 1% effect. And if you've seen the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, it really shows the studies that were done in superfluidity and helium, where once you would reach about, you cool it down to absolute zero, a container of helium, once 1% of those molecules became coherent and aligned, there was what's called a phase transition. And the container began to be very kind of roiling, boiling, just for a brief period. There was a bit of chaos, and then instantly it becomes a coherent field. It's called superfluidity. And it takes on these magical coherent properties. It goes from one form to another. So I view all of the earth and humanity as at that phase transition point. On one level, there is increased chaos and disruption and what have you. On the other end, there's a growing number of people who are awake and conscious. And so as the one grows, there may be more chaos, but then there'll be this point of transition. So the more that we want to be the points of coherence, right? We want to be the points of peace, of truth, of fixing these violent systems, but also in consciousness being these points of coherence that come together. And you only need about 1%. They've been proven over and over and over again. I think it could be less in consciousness, because consciousness is not a mechanistic, chemical, or molecular system. But 1% of the Earth's population is 80 million people. I mean, it's not that many, really. So this is why my fantasy of having a contact and disclosure rock concert that reaches a couple billion people, right? With all these bands, yeah. And it is a truism. You can do this by yourself, but the expression "God loves those that work together." That when people come together, it's the 1 and 1 isn't 2. 1 and 1 is 10, and they've done this with the consciousness studies at Princeton with the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the Peer Lab, by Dr. Bob John, and I knew him. And he loved what we were doing. He said, well, you're really doing in a clinical, like out in the world, and proving what we've done in the lab about this mind effect and consciousness effect. So view it that way, that we're all, everyone's gets keyed in on me, and my little thing. No, look at yourself as your individuality, but that you're plugging in and lighting up this bigger network. So when you go home after this cruise, after a couple more nights of this, do this on your own and find people of like mind, right? And it doesn't have to be a cast of thousands. Obviously, I mean, when I do this, there's a lot of people here. Actually, this is a small group. We usually do this with 500, 800 people with a large group. But you can do it with, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Getting much bigger than 8, you get too many egos and too much incoherence and too much human drama. Right? So you want a group that's coherent, as opposed to just, it's quality over quantity, right? So when you do this at home, look for people of like mind, but that you also resonate with, and there's not any built-in problems. I think it's very important. Now, when you're doing a training, you get all types, right? And Justice has headed up CE5 Texas and had 50 or 100, I don't know how many you've had before, come out. Oh yeah, 100, and he's amazing. He's a great teacher, and very effective. So you can do that sort of for a day or two weekend, but you still want to have a group that you're connected to, that's coherent, that's doing this consistently. That's why every month we have the first Saturday of each month is a CE5 contact month, where groups go out all over the world and are doing it the same day. So it has this effect, and that's done deliberately because of the mass effect of a lot of people in that state of meditative consciousness doing this, because it creates what Rupert Sheldrake called the morphogenic field propagation, where some people liken this the 100th monkey effect, but where once a certain number of people begin to do something, it non-locally, without any direct connection, through the integrating aspect of mind and consciousness, affect people who don't even know you're doing it. And they begin to spontaneously do it, or want to do it, or be inspired to do it. So we're more powerful. All of us are more powerful than we give her credit for, because the totality of the unbounded conscious being is folded within us. So if you connect to that, rather than say, oh, I want to see this and I want to do, the thing the ETs are least interested in, someone says, well, I want one to come up to me and shake hands and have a bagel and lox. And they have to prove themselves to me, because I'm so important, right? No, they don't. And they're not interested. Someone with that attitude, they're going to go, fuck off, mate. I mean it. That's the wrong attitude. That attitude is the least likely to succeed, right? Because it's self-referencing instead of larger purpose. Ironically, the more you're in a state of intending, but not overly self-referencing, the more the ETs will appear. It's the zen of this. It's the grace of it. It's the difference between force, something being forced and something unfolding due to the inner power of it. Very big distinction. This is a key lesson what I'm sharing right now. It's also true in the meditative state, to be in that state and letting go, as it were, letting go and letting God, letting go and letting this happen, as opposed to overly forcing it. Most people's meditations and their attempts to see in remote view are simply cut off by their overly forcing it, and it's too ego-driven. And which is why the techniques that trick the mind in some of these organizations, it'll work to make your remote view, but it also doesn't lead to the overall advancement of higher states of consciousness, right? This is why I rejected the device that was offered to me by the engineer who had invented it in 1956. That would have just sort of helped you click into that, because I think it's safer if it evolves from within. I was friends with a number of people who were the early remote viewers, and also General Stubblewine took a bunch of these young guys through a place where I've been, called the Monroe Institute, and they were doing the hemisync. Well, what happened is that they did this in a forced way. So in other words, here's our military objective. You're going to learn this, and this is because we're going to target this, this, and this. I talked to so many of those early remote viewers who went through that kind of training that did not have the soul blossoming like a lotus, but a mind focus that was using certain kinds of techniques. They almost tricked the mind so you could do it, but the people were not getting the foundation of spirituality and purpose and a higher purpose beyond the tactical mission. And I was told by virtually every one of those people that those young guys ended up committing suicide, becoming alcoholic, having mental breakdowns. Why? It's because they were not approaching it in an integrated, holistic, spiritual fashion. So are there things you can do to bypass it? Yes, but you should only do that if you're also grounded in this larger understanding and purpose. And it needs to be a purpose larger than yourself. It has to be a purpose larger than your own ego and selfish interest. Interestingly, when you hit that sweet spot, that's when the craft and the phenomenon ETs appear. If you're not in that zone, I don't care how much you do this, it's not going to happen. And that is the key. That's the secret sauce. And it sounds very vague and very mushy. It really isn't, because that's what they're looking for. I mean, they're looking for people who are at the level of wanting to do this to assist the world and them, and for a higher purpose. Now, obviously we all like to see a craft or a being, and it's exciting and it's like this. But so many people are driven that way, and it gets self-referenced. And then it becomes like, it's insulting, because then the ETs feel like they're dolphins at SeaWorld, right? And they're there to jump through your hoops and do this for you. No, they're not. It's insulting. It's disrespectful. So this is why, I corrected Jake Burrow. I said, no, don't summon them in. They're not, your dog and pony show, right? There's a attitude about it. There's a respect as an ambassador, but there's also the fact that attitude shuts off the oneness, right? Because it's too much individual ego-driven, as opposed to, why are we doing this? So that intent and the purity of heart of it, but also the practice of it, very much depends on that attitudinal or angle of attack, as it were, or how you approach it. If you approach it in a force way or something very self-referencing because you're a curiosity seeker or you're a conference junkie or they're not interested in that. And they're not going to be interested in you. I'm saying this very bluntly because if that lesson isn't internalized by people, you're not going to get anywhere with this. I've seen this for so many years. And I'll give you an example. We were, the first time we were at Joshua Tree, there was a man who kept surfacing and he had one of those road slugs, the RVs, oh my God. But every time, and he came to a number of things, and he was very ego-driven, but he also had an ulterior motive because he wanted to see and document it so he could figure out the technology so he could be the next Rockefeller of energy. Now, we didn't know that, but I could sense the energy wasn't clear, right? And so every time we had a major event, he was in the toilet, so everyone would see it but him. Then another thing, everyone would see it but him. Because it was but it was his heart and his intent and his lack of clarity of purpose. And it was corrupt. It was ego-driven. It was avaricious, right? And good word, avaricious, greedy. So I think that's something for people to really take to heart. The more you're pure-hearted and innocent and childlike, not childish, childlike, the more the ETs go, they're very childlike actually when you meet them. And they're very, very intelligent, but they're very pure-hearted. So that's what that witness who had those two ETs, that's what he felt. He said the fact that we're trying to capture and kill these beings, it just crushed his soul. Because he was basically a good guy, right? A good man in a bad situation. And this is why Jake Barber, when he was carrying that egg-shaped craft, that one craft, not the egg-shaped, another one, he just, when he tells the story, he first time he told me, he wept. Because it was so, you could feel the consciousness and the purpose. And of course, they just capture and they're going to kill these, and torture these beings. So that is something to really keep in mind. So that's what they're looking, that's who they're looking for. They're looking for people who get what I'm saying right here. And so what I think we're wanting to do is understand that context and the heart and the soul of this. And then everything's possible. And if that isn't owned, then nothing's possible, to be honest with you. By the way, the great thing he missed, this guy who is this money-grubbing weirdo, Philistine, good word, Philistine. He is, yeah, I mean, when I realized what he was really after, he was removed from the operation. But we were at this place the first time, 1996 at Joshua Tree National Park. And we had gone down to out Geology Tour Road, those of you who've been there, and we went down from where the high plane is down where it goes down into another lower valley. And we set up at that thing. I would do these small group things with 60 people in a circle. It's way too many people. Now it's 20 or 30, if I do it. And he was there with his road slug, and we were doing this, and I got the message from the ETs, not here, later, not here. And I could feel they were saying to go back towards the north and east, out Geology Tour Road, to another site. I said, sorry folks, I know it's taken a long time to set all this up, but we're leaving, right? Because now here I can't say we're leaving because we're on a ship, we'd be in the ocean. But, so it is what it is. But I just follow that, clear instructions that I get in image. So we got up, broke down camp, as it were, moved back out. And as we're leaving, now someone left ahead of me, which is a mistake. If you ever do this with me on land, don't ever put your car in front of mine. You will be run into a ditch. But how sweet. But we were going along, and I think it was my third daughter was in the back seat, and Sherry, I was driving, Sherry was in the passenger. All of a sudden, all the lights and everything on that car went down and back up. And I said, they're here. It was like this electromagnetic effect. look over, and a 300-foot diameter teal blue craft, huge, drops like a rock out of the sky and comes down. It looked like a Hershey's Kiss, but it had a trailing, almost like the little thing you pull in the Hershey Kiss, but it was like this beautiful, and it was a light ship, almost like a plasma of that color, of that shape, but it wasn't quite 3D. And I realized because it went and it lit up the whole desert floor where we were supposed to be, and then it merged into the earth and went under the earth. And I was told this is where they have a deep facility, ETs, out there in the center of Joshua Tree. And that's where we've gone ever since. So we found that place, and that's where we've been doing it. And that's why that happened. But that whole event, so many people saw that. But this Philistine money-grubbing guy didn't see that either. I mean, it literally lit up the whole national park. I said, see, your attitude sucks, bro. So, not gonna happen. So, it is funny, but it's actually really something to take to heart. You know, why are you doing this? I mean, it has to be, yes, you're curious and it's a great experience to have, but it has to be tied to something besides your own ego and your own selfish interest. Otherwise, you're not an ambassador to anything. You're just trying to, sort of indulge yourself, which our society is very narcissistic and self-indulgent. And it's hard to break out of that into the consciousness of altruism and doing something for something else besides yourself, right? You know, I mean, and it's become an old-fashioned anachronism to care about anyone but yourself in our society, more so now than it was even 30 years ago. I mean, it's a complete collapse of ethics, morality, and selflessness. It's all just that. So there's part of that. So don't buy into that. Pull out of that. Visualize yourself as a child of God and a denizen of the universe, and that you have taken on the task to volunteer to be an ambassador and a liaison from humans to them to create this, open up this era, whole new era of universal peace, peace on earth, but also peace in space with these other civilizations. That's what we're moving into. So if you get that mission and that's what you're dedicated to, it'll happen.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the next one right here on the Best of Dr. Stephen Greer.